Thanks, Christy, for the reminder. Lane.
Tess is here.
Welcome. South Coast. Thought I heard somebody there. South Central. Southern. Central.
Hi, this is Brenda.
Welcome. Frontier.
Donna and Patty are here.
Welcome. Eastern Oregon.
Kelly Poe's here.
Welcome. Blue Mountain. Four Rivers.
Hi, it's Krista. I'm here.
Welcome, Krista. Okay, one more time real quick. Multnomah. Yamhill.
And here.
Welcome. South Central. And Southern. All right, folks, in the room, you have me, Denise Swanson, and we'll go around the table starting to my right.
Hi, everyone. This is Brett Walker.
Dana Young, Preschool Promise. Joan Blau.
John Reeves.
Ann Morrison. Sarah Michelson. Cassandra Furter.
All right, and any folks on the phone that we did not get to get introduced? Besides us,
Hi, this is Margie McMahon.
Hi, Margie,
McMahon with ELD.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks.
Hi, this is Brittany Grissom in Washington County again. We are having a hard time getting the GoToMeeting to function. Could someone out there send us the link again? Our GoToMeeting is not showing the slide deck at all.
Yeah.
Okay, you're not seeing the agenda?
Nope.
Nothing.
The
It
webinar
just
just says we're waiting for you to start it.
Okay.
Well, on our end, it won't even let us get that far. It just gives us this spinning wheel and then says it's invalid or the link is expired. So if anyone could send us the newest version of the link, greatly appreciate it.
I'll send it to you, Brittany. Hi, this is
thanks,
Adam here.
Great, thank you, Adam. Anybody else having trouble besides Washington?
Mm-hmm.
We actually have Adam's link, so can you send us a different one?
It's the one I'm using is at the bottom of the agenda for today. So I'll send just look at that one.
Thanks, Adam. Okay.
Amy from Blue Mountain.
Oh, hi, welcome, Amy. Thank you. Anybody else?
And Eva from Northwest.
Welcome, Eva. Thank you. So
And
just a
Elena
quick
Barreto from Northwest.
Oh, thank you, Elena. Anybody else? Okay, couple quick public service announcements for you guys. I'll start. First, hopefully you got the email just sent moments ago with the exciting news that your contract is on its way. So, monies will be set back to July 1st. I know we were all concerned about that from the last amendment. And we ask that you get those signed and turned around. They should be out. They're sending them in batches this week. So by the end of the week, if you get that and sign it back to us, get started February 1st. If you have questions, we can get that offline with me afterwards. So thank you, everyone, for your patience and understanding as we got through that fun time with ratification. So, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joan for a quick announcement as well.
Yes, I just want to make sure, I've had a number of different kinds of questions from folks related to the webinar that we're hosting tomorrow from 11 till 12:30, which is going to provide an opportunity for Preschool Promise and the Equity Fund and some the rest of our work on RFAs here at ELD for us to provide an update to you about that. I do want to reassure everyone that we will be recording that, and we will endeavor to get the recording out tomorrow as well. I know that some of you, especially some hub directors, have a conflict, and we understand that, and that's one of the reasons we're recording it. And I'm sure this won't be the last time this information will be shared, but we wanted to make sure that we were sharing it with you and both the CC and our directors. So I'm looking forward to that. And we will move on to that tomorrow. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you.
All right, well, hi, everyone. Nice to join you. I want to start off with a kudos to the ELD team, who I know the contract stuff is really painful, but I just want to commend they're on their hard work to be, and every little step, making sure that gets done. So, yay. It's probably not something to celebrate because we wish it never happened in the first place, but nevertheless, anytime you could drink champagne, into it. Not at work. Sorry. Okay, so I know that we have a quick call today, so I'll try to keep my sort of opening remarks short. One, I think that just want to say it continues to be a super exciting moment here in the state of Oregon, and we are very lucky to have all of you on this call and those of your colleagues and those on your governance boards in this work with us. I know that there's a significant amount of change going on, but I'm confident that following the governor's vision and following Miriam's vision for how to carry that out, we are in a great place for Oregon's children and families to work together, but our children, and I'll just stop that. If everyone could mute themselves, we're getting
Lots of feedback.
some feedback, pocket noise. Thank you. So I just want to start off there and say, thank you for your partnership, your honesty, and your feedback. I look forward to continue conversations with all of you. But I'm really excited for today because I think as much as we can concretize some of our conversations and really talk about our continued work together, that this work will continue to evolve, hopefully continue to get easier and clearer. So as you all know, one of the, I think, back in the 2017 session, there was an original proposal. Oh, you want me to pause?
Yeah, I'm going to ask Sarah to pause again because I really need everyone to check their mute. Like, it's just quite strong that someone's muted. We can hear you moving papers around on your desk. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we all have it's like a phonemic awareness activity. But sorry, it was a long weekend, I guess. But so just with that, I will say I'm excited to partners. I think, as you know, in 2017 there was a vision put forth for hubs and for preschool promise providers, really, and for Head Start providers to come together and think about enrollment. I think that vision has evolved in a variety of ways and has ended up in really this conversation we're in today around coordinated enrollment and what that means for Hub's roles. We know that you're really well poised in your community with your partnerships with providers, with your work with families, and with the folks across the early learning sector to do this work. You might say, what is this work? What does that mean? And so I know that I think when you are done here today, you'll have some answers and some more questions, but that engaging in this work together, I think that even a year from now and definitely 5 years from now, the way that families engage in accessing preschool and early care and education generally to look different because of hard work that we're going to embark on together and the resources we have to get there. So knowing that our call is short, I will just stop there, and I just want to introduce you to some new folks with us today who you'll get an opportunity to meet, some of in person, but get to be introduced over a webinar today. So we have folks from School Readiness Consulting and SRI Education joining us today. We're really lucky to have them on board with our preschool development grant resources to work on a variety of projects in our initial preschool development grant, but one of those big focuses of the work that they're doing in partnership with all of us is around coordinated enrollment. So just a little bit more about who the folks you'll hear from are, because I'm sure they will not brag on themselves as much. So School Readiness Consulting, or SRC, is a great organization that has had experience. Both of the organizations, I'll just, to keep it short, talk about, they're both really well experienced across the United States, working with early care and education and early learning systems broadly here in the Pacific Northwest, on the East Coast, where they're both located, really all around the country at the state, the national organization level, and city level, with work broader than coordinated enrollment, but specific work with coordinated enrollment. So between the two teams, we have a great wealth of expertise of other places, of early childhood, and of data. So I think we're going to learn a lot from them, and hopefully they'll learn a little bit from us as well. But with that, I think I will just pass it over so you can kind of meet the individuals who are on the call today, learn a little bit more about them, and here kind of get into the meat of today.
Thanks. That's fantastic, Sarah. Really appreciate it. Hi, everybody. This is Lindsay Allard-Anyamba. I hope that you can hear me okay. Just want to introduce ourselves really quickly, and then hopefully we'll spend most of the time together hearing from all of you. But it's great to meet everybody. I know the entire team at SRC and SRI on the phone are pretty excited for this conversation and the conversations that we'll be having over the next several weeks with you. So just, I think, Sarah, I really appreciate the introduction. I don't think we need to say too much more about SRC, but just to kind of add that we're an equity-focused organization that is really intent on transforming early childhood and learning environments for children birth through 8. And I think I will just name the folks that are on with me. We have Annie Watson and Layla Samander, who you all will get a chance to meet over the coming weeks. And then there's a lot of folks from our team, not on today's webinar, who I know are anxious to get to know all of you as well. And I'm going to introduce our colleagues at SRI Education. Wei Bing, I don't know if you want to say hello and maybe a couple of words around SRI.
Sure. Thank you, Lindsay. Hi, everyone. My name is Wei Bing Chen, and we at SRI Education are working in partnership with SRC. We have quite a large team from our end, and so I think I'll do the same thing that Lindsay did and just name some of the folks that are with us today on the webinar listening in to learn from you all. And these are the folks who will show up at your site if we've been reaching out to you to conduct some visits. These are our TA providers as well as our case study site visitors. So we have Missy Coffey on the line. She's my co-lead from the SRI end. And then we have Carolina Zamora. Heidi Bernstein is on the line. And then we have Lauren Barton, and we have Catherine Morrison. So hopefully these names will become more familiar to you as we spend the next few weeks together. SRI Education it's a pretty large organization. We're based out of Menlo Park, California, but we have offices in other parts of the country, and we do a lot of research and evaluation around education at large, but we do have a very large group of us who work in early childhood specifically. We also do a lot of technical assistance provision and consulting. And so that is all. I'll hand it back to you, Lindsay. We look forward to working with all of you.
Sounds great. Thanks, Wei Bing. So just want to kind of center us around the time that we'll spend together in the next few minutes, give you a little bit of our thoughts on the purpose and goals. We've done a little bit of introduction, so we'll hope to learn a little bit more about you through our discussion. And then we're setting up what we're calling a listening session. Some of it will be virtual listening through the chat box, and some of it will be through discussion. I guess I want to recognize up front that meeting a whole group of new folks over a webinar where you can't see our faces is probably not the most conducive to to building a relationship, but I am really wanting to make sure that I say on behalf of the whole team that we're very, very interested in hearing your perspectives and learning about all of your successes and the opportunities that remain for the work in your communities. So we're hoping that you'll share all kinds of thoughts with us. And then we'll talk a little bit about the project and what's coming in the next couple of months, and kind of what the activities are and what we'll hope to get you engaged in. And we'll save some time for questions at the end. So I think there'll be plenty of time for you to ask and have answered some of the things that are on your mind as it relates to this work together. So, we really want to listen to and learn from your experiences that have been kind of your engagement and your planning and execution of the sector plans, and just kind of your overall work in these areas in the past several months and couple of years. We're going to, as I said, provide a little bit of an overview of the TA work and review those roles that we hope that we'll each play in our partnership in the coming weeks. And so just to kind of get the listening session started, the idea is that we're going to ask you some questions. Hopefully you all had a chance to take a peek at them, but if you didn't, there'll be a couple of questions that we'll ask in the chat box. And what we really appreciate is if you could just answer over the next 10, 20 minutes as we're talking, these questions in the chat box in all of the ways that you've kind of thought about this in your communities and within the communities that you serve. So we'll send out to everybody the following couple of questions, which are, what are the unique qualities of the communities that you serve? We're in this vein really wanting to understand all of the different and relevant contexts in Oregon. We know that there are lots of differences and potentially similarities in the communities that you serve, and we really want to be able to draw from you what the assets and strengths are of those communities. And also really get from you what you think might get in the way of children and families' well-being. A lot of the work that we'll do together is around kind of developing resources and technical assistance and ideas for how you continue to move forward. And so we think that you all are incredible ambassadors of your communities, and we'd like to learn from you kind of how you see your communities and what their strengths and assets are. The second chat box question, which we'll put out in a few minutes after we've had some time to answer this one, is really how are the early intervention and early childhood special education staff involved in the governance council of your hub? So I think somebody might need to go on mute. Just so that everybody can hear. So we'll type that in about 10 minutes. And what we want to do is just kind of understand from you really what are the ways and kind of activities and or roles that the early intervention or early childhood special education staff play in your governance. So before I move on, maybe we could just do one more reminder for folks to mute their lines if they're not talking. We are going to be moving into a segment on the next slide where we will ask you to come off of mute and talk, but just so that we can kind of honor everybody's contribution and be able to hear folks, if you could just be on mute when you are not talking, that would be super helpful. Perfect. Oh, that's much better. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's get started with really our first line of questioning. So there's really just the big idea here is having you all sit for a moment and reflect on your recent community engagement efforts. We've had a chance to review your sector plans, and it's clear to us that you all did really an incredible amount of work trying to understand through the voices of families, through your stakeholders, and, through looking at a range of different kinds of data, where your communities are, what their assets and strengths are, and really what their desires, needs, and hopes are. And so what we really want to kind of lean into is your best reflection and the stories that you have about those recent community engagement efforts. And we'll start from the idea of what was most successful. So I'll go ahead and go on mute. We can have people unmute and go ahead and share. If everybody wants to share at once, maybe we can use the hand raise function, but I think we don't have that many people on the phone today, so we should be okay to try to be as organic as possible. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you all. Take it away.
This is Kelly Poe. I can speak up.
Thanks, Kelly.
I think the biggest asset, or what paid off the most for us, was using a variety of different tools to engage with parents. We had focus groups, we had home visiting, we had a survey, we had some community forums. So I think the diverse methods, not relying on one single way to interact with parents, but trying to interact with parents in different modalities.
That's terrific. Thanks so much for sharing that.
This is Margie and Mariana Polk, and we did several of the things that Kelly referenced, and because we have such a diverse community, we engaged facilitators for our focus group sessions to hold them in their native language rather than relying on translation. And, and because it was respected people in their community, we had good turnout from our, particularly our Latino community. We also posted our surveys in English, Spanish, and Russian, and had pretty good participation because of that.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. What else worked for communities?
This is Beth from Lane, and I'll echo what Margie and Kelly said in that we, a variety of modalities for reaching families. I think one of the things that was helpful for us was that we have just some really good, strong partnerships in the community, and when we reached out to people to ask if we could come and piggyback on their existing meetings that were already happening with families, whether it was Head Start policy councils or some of our family literacy nights, NAACP, those types of things, we were welcomed in with open arms, and we were able just to take, 15, 20 minutes to have sort of a mini focus group, kind of quick Q&A with folks, and just having that existing structure already in place with people that were already attending reduced our effort in terms of community engagement to a manageable level, especially because we were doing it in over about 2 weeks. So it was super compressed, but we were able to leverage the good partnerships that we had to do that, and that was both built the partnership and I think got more parent participation that we wouldn't have normally got if we had tried to host something on our own.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
This is Donna from the Frontier Hub. And I think we did a lot of the same things that Kelly and the others did, but one of the things that proved to be the most successful for us, we're a small program, and we're housed in the Head Start, with the Head Start program, and also another publicly funded, but it's a preschool for over-income children. And we didn't want to rely on just putting out a survey and getting the results back. We interviewed parents as they came through the door and got a lot of really great feedback that way. The other thing that happened is the people that were on our stewardship committee turned out to be the best we could get, because they also took surveys and interviewed people that they knew and got them back to us, so our feedback was really rich.
Hi, this is Krista from Four Rivers Early Learning Hub, serving 5 counties. And we, I think 2 things. One, the structure of the toolkit, it kind of changed a little bit, and we kind of, one of the things that was wonderful about it is the requirements, initially at least, to think outside the box about who needed to be part of our planning, and it brought some voices that we that hadn't typically been a part of our dialogue at a leadership level. And I think that having those voices be a part of our planning in a leadership way was a really important part of the process, and we benefited from it in other subsequent ways. And then I think the second thing is the real focus on data and the huge amount of data that we receive from the division really forced us to think about who could help us with data and how we would make it meaningful to the people on our stewardship committee, so that we really could have a process that helped us and our community. And so we were able to identify some partners that helped us with that, and I think that it resulted in some rich conversations about what the data was saying and what it wasn't saying, and that really helped guide our efforts around engaging our families. And so stronger partnerships, more leadership voices that hadn't been there from the past, and some new ways to look at data with an eye for making meaning that could drive some of our work.
Thanks, Krista. Anybody else?
Just to echo what a couple other folks, this is Elena from the Northwest Early Learning Hub. We also worked primarily through community partners and were able to attend many of their meetings and events to be able to host focus groups. We also did some surveys, but I would say that the best feedback or engagement that we got was when we attended in person and were able to have conversations with families, especially when we were able to host it in the primary language of the families who were attending.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anybody else want to build on what's been said so far?
Yeah, this is Adam from Washington County, and we're going to probably add more, but we had parents inform the process. So we had a work group, family engagement work group. We brought on a consultant who did some preliminary work, such as developing an outreach plan and a survey, and then so the parents then and a couple of providers were in there provided feedback on that. And that led to one of the things that they, in addition to the questions and how they were worded, one of the things that they provided was the best way to reach parents. And so that resulted in some interesting ideas. And so we had, similar to what other people said, found a lot of it. While we did an online survey, we did in-person surveys as well in the lobbies of WIC and DHS, because that's where a lot of people are trying to reach frequent, as well as some other community events. And when we did that, we also gave little gift cards to honor their time in engaging in that 10, 15-minute conversation.
Thanks, Adam.
And I know we also translated it in maybe I think it's like 7 or 8 different languages, so that helped as well.
Great. Yeah, that's great. So I think, definitely what we've heard is some really rich stuff. I mean, you all talked about using families to kind of lead and envision the work for other families, the use of all of these really different modalities. But I think one of the kind of key factors that we heard from all of you is really kind of leveraging relationships with ambassadors and kind of in-person conversations when possible, building on the things that exist, and honoring families' time. And then some really neat stories about finding kind of new voices and developing new partnerships. Maybe we could talk a little bit about kind of the complementary data that you were able to work with, and just kind of the nature of data overall. So we know that when we hear from families, like those are the voices that are kind of as real as it gets. And we're always trying to triangulate what we hear from families with, kind of what we know at a more rolled up level, population level, or community-based level. So maybe some of you could talk to us a little bit about how you see yourselves and your hub kind of building on or complementing through your community engagement efforts what we all kind of know is the imperfect nature of quantitative data, and what is always available is kind of never caught up to what the reality is, but is somehow a tool in planning and kind of triangulating. How did you all think about triangulating that and complementing what was available?
This is Margie with Marion and Polk, and the challenge that we had with much of the data in terms of the existing pre-K services was that many of our pre-K providers serve multiple counties and well beyond our hub region, and so the data was very mixed, and we couldn't really see what was available in our own region. Because of this, we took the Preschool Promise quarterly data collection tool and sent that out to all of our publicly funded pre-K providers and asked them to complete the same template, which gave us a lot more granular detail about the race, ethnicity, and special needs of the children that they were serving, which really helped us much better understand our existing reach and where our gaps were.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Margie. What else?
This is Donna with Frontier Hub again, and we couldn't use the data that we got from the state, mostly because a lot of our rural communities have schools, and their data is redacted because there's so few students that it could identify a child. So we had to do all of our own data collection to make everything work.
And what were some of the ways that you did that?
Well, we have great relationships with the schools, so we relied on their data, and when we called, they were able to tell us and give us the information that we wanted. Community partners also shared some of their data, and we get quarterly reports from each of the schools that in both counties that are in our hub, and they give us data that we can use, and we then expanded it a little bit and got more data so that when we got done, we had enough data so we had a true picture, real-time picture of what's going on in both counties.
That's great. Thanks. I'm sure other folks can really benefit from some of those specifics. Anybody else have a thought about this?
Yeah, this is Adam from Washington County. We complemented the data we had a research firm that we had already a contract with, and they helped by developing maps, interactive maps for all the different factors we were looking at, so that our decision makers could go in there and kind of play around. And they were heat maps, so it showed where the highest concentrations are based on smaller geographic areas. So they had to go and get a lot of the data that we needed in order to have that more refined mapping capability.
That's great. That's fantastic. So maybe we can move together into some of the challenges or barriers. It sounds like there is definitely no shortage of successes that you all encountered as you did your work to understand, the communities that you serve. But I also imagine, I heard a little bit about a compressed time frame, and so we know that that's always challenging. Were there other challenges or barriers that you all ran into, and kind of what were the ways that you worked to get through those as you completed your sector plans?
This is Kelly. I can share about a challenge that we had that was a great learning experience. We have a growing population of refugees in Ontario, and it doesn't show up on any of the data reports anywhere. And so we went to the refugee center and got a list of the families and what countries they were coming from, what language they spoke, and got some cultural information, and it was a two-way conversation. So it ended up being, we got a lot of great data, we got a lot of information and anecdotal stories that helped us with our plan. anyway, it was pretty great, and because it came directly from the source, it was credible and in real time.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. What other challenges?
Hey, this is Molly in Multnomah. The sheer size of our county made for a challenge, 813,000 people. So that was a piece of it.
So Molly, maybe you could say a little bit more about, kind of how you thought about that challenge and what you feel like worked and maybe didn't, and, what could be useful.
Well, we were really fortunate in that we had been working on a preschool, countywide preschool plan for the last 5 years. So we had networks of parent leaders all throughout the community. It's just been, I'd say that the challenge, especially of such a large county, is not necessarily having parent input, but it's letting organizational leaders understand the depth of the parent input, because they're used to survey and pull quotes, and so that was the challenge on two dimensions. We could never have done it in the short timeline we were given, but fortunately we had been well underway in that work. Does that address your question?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And so I think what I kind of heard you say is like maybe threefold. So there's this challenge when you have a lot of people to hear from. I think two things that I heard you kind of say as strategies. One is building on existing efforts and kind of connecting the sector planning with like the momentum that had already been occurring in the community. And then I think, there's this kind of other idea that you raised, which is really kind of socializing, potentially, if this is what you said, socializing decision makers to different ways to think about and hear from family perspective. Yeah. So, not just kind of this very thin, like, here's what parents said, here's a couple quotes, but really kind of working to make sure people understand how to listen to families in a deeper and maybe a new way. And so those are really great strategies to deal with the challenge that you raised. Thanks.
This is Beth
someone
from
else.
Lane. Yeah, this
Go ahead,
is
Beth.
Beth from Lane. To add on to Molly's challenge, so Lane County is fairly large geographically, and again, sort of that compressed time frame didn't give us a chance to have family engagement efforts in some of our farther flung rural communities. It just takes longer to get stuff set up and the time to go out there and meet with those families. So that felt like a missed opportunity. We had over 1,000 parents respond to our online survey from all over the county, and so we did get some of their voices captured in that format, but there wasn't a way to do the really deep family engagement or the business and private sector regional opportunity engagement that we were able to do at the Eugene and Springfield Chamber, because we just didn't have time to go out to those communities and try to organize something. So that was a challenge. I do feel like our rural communities were somewhat underrepresented in that way, even though we did our best.
Sure. So that's really helpful. I think it would be interesting to hear if there were other folks who were challenged by engaging other sectors. So, I mean, we heard a little bit about kind of finding some new voices as a success. But were there other hubs that found kind of engaging other sectors? Maybe it's, chambers or other business leaders, or maybe local elected officials. Were there other kind of groups that you tried to engage that felt challenging? I think it would be helpful for us to hear a little bit about that.
This is Margie from Marion and Polk, and it wasn't so much about engaging other sectors, but that we have somewhat of a history of the sectors who do join in a lot of these planning processes feel a need to really advocate on behalf of their own programs. And that they somewhat, rather than coming to the table to represent all, they feel like they need to represent their own particular programs. So in order to overcome that, we use the kindergarten assessment data by a number of different demographic characteristics, whether it be geography or special needs or race, ethnicity, or English language learners, and had people prioritize each of those populations or geographic areas in a blind, unidentified evaluation. So the race, ethnicity
what a cool idea.
has been taken off, and people then basically looking at just the data, prioritized where they felt the highest need communities were. And then we shared with them after they'd finished scoring what each of those areas represented. So it was a way in which to use a real neutral evaluation process to prioritize.
That's a really neat idea. Thank you for sharing that. Did anybody else kind of do anything that, you know, in this way that kind of helped to, we know that, you know, early learning has historically always been, you know, underfunded and under-resourced, and there can be these kind of hurdles to overcome as it relates to competition within communities. Other ways that you kind of dealt with that challenge specifically, that was a really innovative way to think about it. Okay, maybe not right now. So I guess last question for this portion of our discussion, it would be great to hear from each of you just maybe kind of one nugget that that you learned that you think could help your colleagues in other hubs. I mean, I'm not sure if everybody has the time to read everybody else's sector plan, but they're very rich, and it's clear that you all went about this in some really innovative and creative ways. And it would be great to kind of have you reflect on maybe one thing that you think you learned through the process. And you don't have to contain it to just kind of the activity of sector planning, but like the entire process of really kind of enacting this sector plan and thinking about where your hub is headed strategically over, you know, the coming year or so. What's one thing that you learned that you think could inform your colleagues? It'd be great if everybody could share something.
This is Krista, and I'll start. I would say don't be afraid to ask other experts for help. We engaged some data and research folks that turned out to be super helpful in our process, and it took a load off of me to know that I had people who understood a lot of this work better than I did, and that they were a partner and a team with me. That made it a lot less overwhelming.
Thanks, Krista, and thank you for starting us off. That's great.
This is Donna with the Frontier Hub, and I think that our stewardship committee being thoughtful about who we invited and building ownership with them really helped us move everything forward at a rapid pace, especially since we needed to move it forward at a rapid pace.
Yeah, for sure. That's great.
This is Kelly from Eastern Oregon. I think the thing that I'm still that I still wrestle with, and I don't think it needs to be over, is I don't think that we really heard the voices of our most isolated families. Some of our families live more than 4 hours away from our hub, and so some of those families are in communities that are so small that it's almost, I don't want to say impossible, but it's very difficult to travel, you know, to spend 2 days to go and get feedback from one or two families at the most. I struggle with that because I don't think that that's equity. However, on the other hand, one of the gems of our planning process was I partnered with a home visiting supervisor on a lot of our community work, and because of her experience and connection and relationships in the home visiting world, she was able to connect with a lot of families and bring insights to the table that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So I have a lot of concern about the representation of our isolated and remote families, and I learned a lot through the process.
Thanks so much for raising that, Kelly. I think that's really important. I definitely think that when we try to support you all with developing resources, these are some of the things that we hope to support you with. Anybody else?
So this
Jen
is
and
Mary
Yamhill.
Nicole again, and we learned that we thought we'd done a pretty good job of family engagement in the past, but by very intentionally building them into much of the decision-making process, they became a much stronger group, and by doing all the outreach, we've actually recruited additional members for our parent advisory committee and also for our local special needs program advisory group. In addition to that, we've also realized that there's data that's really key for our decision making and effectiveness as a hub that needs to be collected on an ongoing basis rather than just on a special project basis. So we hope to build that into our continuous work.
That's great.
This is Jen in Yamhill. I was just about to say the same thing, that about building the networks for the families to be able to provide ongoing feedback into our processes. We were just developing our Parent Leadership Council as we just launched last month. And so asking some of those parents who were really passionate about what they were sharing with us to come and be a part of an ongoing conversation, I think gave them a feeling of, well, this isn't just, they're not just filling out a survey. They're actually part of something that's taking off. And so I think that was really helpful. And then just taking the opportunity at the same time to have conversations about the way we communicate with the community and some of these bigger picture issues. They learned about things that they'd never heard about. And so having that conversation about how we can better communicate what we're doing to the rest of the community was super helpful to us.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I mean, I think that, clearly this idea of, not one time, but kind of ongoing both leadership and feedback is going to be really, really critical for your efforts moving forward. So thanks for reflecting on that. Anybody else want to share?
This is Begoña with Washington County. This is not something that we learned, but it was a really good reminder. It is about establishing quality control mechanisms around interpretation and translation, just to make sure that what we are getting back from professionals like interpreters or translators actually is easily understood by families, and in many cases it wasn't, and it required additional hours from our staff to make corrections.
So that's really important. Thank you for raising that.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, for those that don't have the ability of have like a second filter or tier of quality, what will happen if they are not aware that translations are not really accurate?
That's right. Thank you for that. Great. So I think as I pass it over to my colleague Wei Bing, I would just want to thank you for this segment and also appeal to you, please. We've still got these two questions in the chat box. I don't think anybody's responded yet. I know you were all super engaged in answering, so thank you for that. But as we transition, it would be fantastic to have you all really weigh in here. We would love to be able to kind of play back for you some of those unique qualities of the communities that you serve and the assets and strengths of your families. So I'm going to pass it over to Wei Bing, who will walk you through the next set of questions, and we'll look for your responses in the chat box as well.
Great. Hi.
Right.
So, sorry, I was going to say Missy Coffey, who is also from SRI, was going to lead this section of the conversation, actually. So go ahead, Missy.
Thanks, Wei Bing. Can everybody hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So as we transition, I think it's actually a natural point of the conversation to think a little bit about, talk a lot about data use. Data use is a big part of ongoing kind of coordinated enrollment activities. So what we want to talk a little bit about today as we begin this conversation with you and start to think about the TA needs around coordinated enrollment is we want to pose this question, which is in an ideal world, what does successful collaborative work in your region look like? And we have three particular areas that we want to talk the group through this afternoon and hopefully kind of just begin this conversation. We know nationally what has kind of worked and where some of the challenges have been, but we also want to learn from you. I think that many of you have had some successes in these areas, so we also like to hear about that as we work with your hubs. But today we just want to start the conversation by saying, if in an ideal world, we know the challenges, we know the possible solutions, what would it look like to do this well? So we're going to start that, and hopefully we can start with the area of marketing, outreach, and recruitment. So if you all were to coordinate your marketing, outreach, and recruitment, what would that look like in your hub if that was done successfully?
This is Marion Polk, and for us, it means that the message needs to be delivered in multiple languages, and also that it needs to have some real intentionality. Parents tend to tune in to that which is important to them, and so doing it in such a way that it's a message that they find it important to what their immediate needs are, I think is a key part of how to reach them.
That's great. And I think there was somebody else jumping in as well.
So this is Begonia, and I have a question. It is about the RFA, but basically, is there gonna be a language in the RFA that indicates that whoever is applying for this has to be part of an aligned and coordinated enrollment system? And I guess that there won't be super clear language because this is going to be finished, this project, at the end of next month, and the RFA is going to be released in a few days. But if there is not a language that is creating that alignment and the contract is not creating that alignment, it doesn't really matter what we say here.
Hi, Begonia. This is Joan Blau. We're going to record your question and make sure that it goes into our frequently asked questions document, but that's not the purpose of the conversation today, but thank you for asking that.
Thank you.
Other thoughts, if in an ideal world, if there was marketing, outreach, and recruitment being done collaboratively across your hub, what else might that look like?
This is Krista, and I would have to say, I think two things, and for me, they're equally important, but in different ways. One, it's easy for parents. So, however we're marketing and outreaching and recruiting, it seems like there should be we all shouldn't be having a whole gazillion different messages that tell everybody something different. In our community, we're talking about a single point of contact, which actually isn't single, but we're trying to make it so that it's not that we're doing the work on the backside as programs, but for families, it's simple and it makes sense. Which is the second part, which means that there's some kind of agreement or partnership, non-competitive environment with our partners who are providing whatever kind of services we're marketing, outreaching, and recruiting for, so that we're all working together to get what families need to them in a way that is simple for them and not overly laborious.
That's great. I think that's going to be really important. Kelly. That's a great perspective. Hey, Kelly.
So in Eastern Oregon, we have 3 very spread out counties. over a large geographic region. And I think it's really important that for us to be successful, our collaborative has to use a common language, even if it's in different languages. The terms that we use and the efforts that we're doing. So we'll have multiple languages, but the common usage of terms. So all of the 3 counties are asking the same questions. I suppose that's what I'm getting to. The other thing is somehow, if there is a single point contact for coordinated enrollment, it needs to feel local, whether you are in Enterprise or Joseph, or if you're in Adrian or Jordan Valley, because people in Adrian don't want to coordinate through someone who's in Enterprise, and Enterprise doesn't want to coordinate through someone who's in Huntington, because it's not local. So somehow that the system to be collaborative, truly collaborative, it needs to feel local no matter where you're at.
Great. And I think that even gets us, Kelly, so thanks for making that transition, and into kind of the idea of how do you coordinate these eligibility programming and enrollment pieces, right? So in an ideal world, what would it look like if you did that collaboratively? And this might build from the marketing outreach, but if you can be specific about eligibility programming and enrollment, that would be great.
Yes, thank you.
This is Marianne Polk, and one of the things we found to be really essential to effective collaboration with our various pre-K programs that are across our 2 counties was to really invite them all to come to the same table and to talk about what their needs are and what messages have worked and what techniques have worked, and then really building on the strengths that they've each identified. And also then having a common way in which across the entire system we were monitoring where vacancies existed and where waiting lists were developing, so that families could be placed where there's space and support could be given across all the programs.
Great.
Hi, this is Bess from Lane. When I think about sort of the ideal environment for eligibility programming and enrollment, I think about a shared database and common technology that we can use across agencies and programs. So we in Lane do centralized enrollment with our Head Start and Preschool Promise, and we don't have a shared child level database, and so it's incredibly time consuming for us to place all of the families that apply, because we're going back and forth between and using paper forms to try to figure out how to place these kids in both according to their parental choice and family choice, and their prioritization in terms of our focus population. So having some kind of a technological solution that was available to all the early learning programs in our region would be lovely.
I'll echo what Beth said, and this is Krista again. And one of the things that on this one that I just get to is I'm back at the family start of things again, because eligibility may be one part of this puzzle, but we're also finding that if there is a preschool that happens to be on or near an elementary school, and there's an older sibling who also is attending that elementary school, that the parents' desire would be for the children to be close for a lot of really practical and good reasons. And so there's that, and then there's other things like our regional stewardship committee was talking about the impact of children who've experienced some kind of trauma, and do they need a bigger classroom or a smaller classroom. So I'm using these as examples to get to my point, which is I keep coming back to some form of I don't know what kind of assessment it is or screening or what it looks like, but I think it would be helpful in an algorithmic kind of way to understand what families want and what they're coming in with, and thinking about that both from, like financial eligibility. Are they 100%, 200%? Do they most, is it Head Start? Is it Early Head Start? Is it OPK? Is it Preschool Promise? Those are certainly like easy questions to answer when you have specific data. And then more, dare I say, relevant to the family's point of view would be where the kiddos are going to elementary school, or did so-and-so have this preschool teacher when they were young and they have an existing relationship? Those are some of the more nuanced things that are part of my thinking when I'm trying to imagine an ideal in this. And a respectful way of gathering that information, and then being able to work with community partners to help families both feel trusting of us, and then also, and of whatever system we're creating, and then also feel like they're really getting their needs met. That it just seems like it has to be that, or else nobody will use it.
That's great. And can I ask a follow-up question to that quickly then? So how would you know if parents liked it, used it? How would you, in an ideal world, how would you get some of that feedback from the families?
I know how I'm building it, but I think that has to be an embedded part of the discussion. So if you're going to do some kind of an assessment, or you're going to be engaging families, embedded in whatever that looks like is some kind of a process where you're offering them an opportunity to check back in and see how it's going. When I think about how we're thinking about engaging families, it's not just here, we're going to make you a referral and set you here. It's more like, and then can we check back in with you? Or do you know, like, you can call us if something else pops up? Or do you know, like, there are these other things that we can be a point of contact to help you figure out, so that you're not in this by yourself. So I think whatever it is, there has to be some kind of and honestly, if somebody says, no, I really think we've got this, and that's okay, then respecting that choice, but also making sure that through other outreach opportunities and communications, that the community is also reminding folks in a global way that they can touch back in and know that there's a place they can go if they have concerns or questions or need something. Otherwise, we're going to call back and say, so how's it going?
Great, thank you. Do others have any thoughts?
Hey, this is Molly in Multnomah. We have coordinated enrollment in the various home visiting programs that operate in the county under a lot of different divisions, and trying to figure out that the same questions that Krista's raising around what does the family want has been just very labor intensive and relational based, and we don't have a data set, so it's been paper for those thousands of kids, and it's a challenge. I guess the other thing I just wanted to say was that, but it's working, is that we've been paying attention to how Seattle's doing it with their universal pre-K and how they do coordinated enrollment through their website, and a lot of it has to do with you get your first couple of choices, and they have a matchmaking algorithm, but it's not going to be it's just not going to be easy. I guess that's what I'm saying. It's not as much a technical solution to this challenge as it will be a relational piece to it too, and so looking forward to it.
Great, and then we'll move into the last part, which is selection and placement, which I think is sometimes the hardest piece when we've looked at this nationally. So in an ideal world, what would that look like? And is it similar or different from the eligibility programming and recruitment pieces?
Hey, this is Beth from Lane. So our selection and placement process is different than our enrollment process in that we convene a committee of providers to go through our kids that are eligible for enrollment and that have been prioritized according to our set of scores, essentially, and then try to place them in the programs. And it's incredibly labor intensive. This is the part that takes the longest and is the hardest to do, I think. And it's just a big puzzle across our region. And so just, again, thinking about what kind of sort of technology solution could be put into place for that so that providers could weigh in, but also there could be flexibility and real-time updates to when a child leaves a program or transfers from a program. This is the piece that's just requires a lot of human capital and time because you're going one by one through each child. And perhaps there's some kind of like magical algorithm that I'm unaware of that we could put into place. So I don't know. I don't have any solutions to this one, but I think it's certainly something that we could use some really smart brains on.
Who others have thoughts?
Marion and Paul.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And because we have a lot of different providers in our community, the algorithm gets pretty complex, particularly because we have some providers who offer multiple types of pre-K services with multiple eligibilities. And so they're already doing their own sorting and placement based on eligibility within their 4 or 5 different types of pre-K services that they offer. And so I think as we understand, we're looking at doing Just Preschool Promise here in the initial stages of the coordinated enrollment. And so it'll be really important for us to think about how do we do it with just one program that might be one program out of 5 for one of our providers, and oftentimes for several of our providers, because they'll be doing their own placement with their other programs, and they're going to want to be able to understand and partner with the placement around the Preschool Promise children.
Yeah, it's hard to separate those out, right? So the system needs all the different parts, so that's a good point. So in an ideal world, what I'm hearing is that they would kind of all work together, and that separating out one is really tricky, and that they really are interconnected in the systems that you guys are building. All right, any final thoughts before I know I have to turn it back over to Lindsay? All right, well, thank you all for your time. We continue to think about this, and your TA folks will be asking you similar questions, so it's good to just hear what the group's perspective is today. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Missy. Thanks, all. I guess I just, we don't have a ton of time left, and I do want to make sure we go over some of the process pieces with you. But it would be interesting to hear kind of what was this like to hear from one another, and do you have any reflections on kind of having this type of conversation and what came out of it?
This is Margie, and I think it would be super if there can be in the future iterations of similar projects an opportunity for us to learn from each other while we're in the midst of the doing, rather than, 60 days after we finish it. Although there's certainly a big sigh of relief and a little bit of healthy breathing that occurs after we're done. Sometimes we're searching for strategies, and so we could learn a lot from each other rather than having to all figure out how to invent the same light bulb individually.
Thanks, Margie. Appreciate that.
I think, this is Adam. It's helpful, but I feel like So I agree with Margie that it'd be helpful to hear during the process, but also maybe right after the process, it might be good to maybe send out a quick survey so that it's fresh on our minds and we can go ahead and share that stuff that we've just been so recent for us. Because now we're kind of trying to, remember back, a month ago, and lots has happened since then. Plus, this format or this forum, I don't find as conducive, because I'm sure there's a lot that people have to share, and there's just such a small amount of time.
Appreciate that. I think that that makes a lot of sense. There are definitely probably lots of other formats. I hope maybe where we head next, we can kind of think about other ways to share this. One of the things that we're hoping to ask you all actually is, not to take too much more of your time, but I think, like you said, Adam, this just kind of scratched the surface. And what we would really love to do is to be able to kind of dig in and hear some of the stories that, occurred during your planning and the ways that you engage your community. So I hope it's all right if we kind of over the next several weeks, either during the process when we're out visiting you all, for some of you there will be some on-site visits, and even if there aren't, if we could maybe set up some calls and even have them be kind of Zoom so we can see each other's faces and talk a little bit more in depth. But I think all of your reflections are important and I think will contribute to not only what our teams are able to kind of put together in terms of continued learning and reflection, but there's always an opportunity as this happens again to do it better and differently. So thanks for the reflections. Just want to spend a couple of quick minutes talking about where we're headed in the next couple of months. And really, what this project that we've been brought on to help support, what some of the aims are. So, SRC and SRI are really, we've been engaged to support hubs as you continue with your, your understanding of the sector and your communities. And so as you continue with your planning efforts, we hope to continue to learn, as I said a moment ago, and kind of dig in deeper to what has been successful and where you all hope to head next, and also what you'd like in order to get there. So there'll be some technical assistance for some of the hubs. There'll be some training for all of you, and some resources for everybody that we hope will meet those needs. So part of what we're trying to do through hearing from you is capture some of these stories and these reflections, but also get a sense of, potentially what might be helpful in terms of resources and technical assistance moving forward. So just a little bit of context in terms of how you all will be engaged. There are a few different groups, and hopefully you see yourself represented here. There are some pink lines around folks that are going to be participating in community and stakeholder engagement and technical assistance. And so community and stakeholder engagement is really around us understanding this being a starting point, and we're hearing your feedback that it would be much better to be face to face and kind of hear from you in a kind of a deeper and potentially a more immediate way. But this was felt like too important of a touch point to miss. So the stakeholder and community engagement is an opportunity for us to learn how you all are doing that work, how you did that work during your sector plan, and some of the things that you raised as potential opportunities to kind of continue iterating around, learning about, or doing better next time. So for the folks in the pink, you'll be part of that group, as well as you'll be receiving some technical assistance. So I'm assuming that for most of you, you've already heard from somebody on our kind of respective team, our larger project team. And the idea is that there'll be some kind of gathering of where you all see yourself as a hub as it relates to some of this work around sector planning and working towards what it means to, to kind of serve communities in a continuous and coordinated way. And each of the folks that are participating in TA, each of the hubs will have a visit from one of our team members that will kind of help you do some reflection and set some priorities and hopefully move along some of the ways that you've been thinking about making progress. The next folks, the folks in kind of that are shaded by blue, are community and stakeholder engagement hubs. So you'll be participating in that first part of what I said, hopefully sharing some stories with us. And there's also another touch point towards the end of February where we'll all get together and talk a little bit about kind of sharing out what the progress and kind of next opportunities are. And then the purple hubs will participate in the community and stakeholder engagement and also participate in a case study process. So one of the things that we've been asked to do is to really think about how we document the work that you all have been doing around your sector planning and around the ways that you think about some of the things that Missy was just talking with you about in terms of kind of approaching a coordinated process across your different communities. And so the folks in purple are both community and stakeholder engagement and case study hubs. And so just to kind of give you an idea, now you saw your color, and these are the touch points. As you can see, there's a theme around a condensed time frame. I think we can all thank the federal government for some of that. But I think ultimately we're hoping to get as much meaningful time together with you as we possibly can within the next month and a half. So the second half of January, everybody will have gotten some outreach, whether that is from your technical assistance provider or the case study team, or if you are a community and stakeholder engagement hub, hopefully we can kind of reach out and learn whether you're willing to share some more in-depth stories with us around what we talked about a little bit today. So that webinar, this webinar is really just kind of the first touch point to hear about your experiences with your sector planning. And then you'll see that if you're either in the case study hub group or the TA group, there will be some individualized calls that'll happen later this month. And towards the beginning of February, we'd like to, as I said, follow up with some of the hubs around this community and stakeholder engagement piece, as well as the technical assistance hubs will have some additional follow-up. And then the next couple pieces, there'll be a virtual interview and an on-site visit for both the case study participants and the technical assistance hubs. And then the technical assistance hubs will also engage in a self-assessment towards the middle or later in February. And then we have a touch point all together at the end where we'll come together and really try to bring the big lessons that we've learned and heard from you and play some of those back, as well as providing some resources for everyone that kind of help speak to some of the things that you've raised throughout the case study, the technical assistance, and the community and stakeholder engagement planning process. So I think with that, that was just a really quick run through of what you can expect from us and what we're hoping to ask you for. I think I'll stop now, and as a team, the SRC, SRI folks, along with ELD, can respond to questions that you have. Sure, Adam. So Adam's question, for those who aren't looking at the chat box, is a question around clarifying the distinction between the technical assistance and the case study hubs. So I think the case study hubs are really, we're trying to kind of document the process and play that back as a kind of a synthesis of what is happening around coordination and kind of what might be some of the best practices for thinking about this at the community level where the hubs sit. And the technical assistance folks are going to be probably more engaged in an active process where a little less about kind of documenting for the purpose of playing back and a little bit more around doing some self-assessment work and then having some opportunity to work directly with folks from SRC and SRI on creating some goals and kind of plans for progress. I don't know if either my colleagues from SRI or ELD would like to add anything to that clarification.
Yes.
Hey there, this is
go. Go ahead, Ms. Ika. Go ahead.
Oh, this was Anne. I was just going to say from ELD, the technical assistance is intended for hubs that have not had preschool promise in their regions. So doing a little bit more about how to prepare around that with the lens of what coordinating enrollment might look like in the first year.
Right. So this is Wei Bing from SRI, and we really are thinking of it as an opportunity to get to hear from you all in these hubs who have been sort of assigned to participate in this, what you think your needs are and what your concerns might be as you think about trying to engage in this process moving forward. So we're trying to help think through, what steps you might take moving forward and what supports you might need moving forward, so that we can relay that back to the larger system of supports that might be available to you, including, other hubs who have possibly had the experience doing some of this work before, and the state. Does that help clarify a little bit, or would you like to have us speak to the case studies as well? Sounds like people are okay.
Other questions or things that are on your mind?
This is Margie at Marion and Polk, and I think that there's a lot of change ahead for all of us, not just those who are new to Preschool Promise. And so just using that as kind of a lens for how you engage in the work with all 16 hubs, I think would be really helpful.
Thanks for that, Margie. I think that's super helpful. And I mean, I think that I just tried to reply to Annette as well. I mean, I think our teams are completely open to your feedback or kind of your thoughts collectively and individually about the best ways to kind of hear from you, learn from you, and move forward in the time that we've got. So completely appreciate that as a reality. I think we can definitely use that as a lens, and if there are particular ways in which you think that lens could be applied in a concrete way that would be in service of this work together, we're all ears for sure.
Hey, this is Bess from Lane. Sorry, I had to run to the restroom, so you may have covered it and I missed it. But just curious about what the follow-up is after you're sort of done with your parts, like end of February. Like what?
Hi, this is Anne. So unfortunately, as our partners alluded to, because of the federal grant being done at the end of February,
we are limited to then. I think our big culminating activity will be we are co-planning the Learning Collaborative with SRC and SRI and plan to have many of those materials and documents that we've been talking about as being supportive, as well as sort of what our own ongoing TA plan might look like. Be available at that time, and so I think we'll be continuing to talk about, you know, how to make the most useful materials, useful resources, and also I think also how to, you know, work together and continue this work at the collaborative and beyond.
Great, thanks, Anne. And just to follow up to that, so do you anticipate having a process, a protocol, system, what have you, in place in order to start coordinating enrollment for Preschool Promise in May? Is that the goal? Because we're getting questions now from families about next school year, and we just don't know what to tell them.
What are we doing next year for preschool? So Beth, we just want to make sure we understand the question. So you're asking so I would say that this TA that is happening now, culminating with the Learning Collaborative, and then the work going forward, like this is starting the process of preparing to do coordinated enrollment for Preschool Promise this spring. And then I'm going to ask Dana if she can comment on, like, when do we think the coordinated enrollment process will really kick off in communities? Like, what is our hope for that timeline? Do we know yet at this point?
Thank you for that question. I think right now we're still working on all those finer details. I mean, I think that the most important thing for us is that our families and our children are ready to go ahead and start Preschool Promise in September, right? So more to come on that. And as we will go ahead and go over some of those details tomorrow as well.
Okay. So more to come very soon, Beth. Thanks for that question.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm conscious of the time, and I imagine that many of you are going to be moving on and transitioning to other meetings. I do want to say, on behalf of our team, just one more time, thank you so much for the time together today. We were really excited to be able to at least get a little introduction to you and be able to begin a conversation. By no means is this the end. We plan to be, like I said a minute ago, in touch in lots of different ways with you all and are looking forward to that. And so just some contact information, if that's helpful to you. You also have it on the deck that Denise sent around in preparation for our time together today. So feel free to be in touch if you have any further questions. And other than that, our team will look forward to seeing you in Oregon really soon.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.